everyone, I'm Anastasia. I welcome you all to this new session of Fundamental of Nursing. So in our previous session, as we have discussed about the infection control, we've come to know why is it important as well as what are the benefits that we get if we follow this infection control practice, right? In today's session, we are going to learn about the nature of infection. As it has been said that infection involves injury of the body by the living organism which enters it. So here, as we know that the body of an individual is related to the external world by its surface only. So for this microorganism to enter the body of an individual, they need to pass through the surface. It is also true that the bacteria which are present in the intestine of an individual, either those normally present or even the unusual varieties, may, under certain circumstances, produce substances which is proven to be injurious when it is absorbed. But this is not infection, this is just an analogous to any sort of poisoning. And also here, it is also very important for us to know that each surface of the body has its own bacterial flora. So this organism lives on the surface of the body, either on the matter which is secreted by the surface or even sometimes use up an inappreciable amount of the body material. However, many of these bacteria will be harmless because some bacteria also act as a source of protection. Most of these bacteria are harmless, some are also even protective. Here, they will be producing by their growth changes in the surface fluid that becomes hostile to the existence of others as well as the pathogenic form. The surface also frequently harbor the pathogenic organism, which will await some condition to arise that will permit them to effect the entrance into the tissues. So the surface protects the body from invasion to a greater or less damage. The skin protects by the impervious horny layer on the outside and the external cells of which are dead are constantly being thrown out. So it is also in this layer that many bacteria will be found. However, the condition of growth here is not very favorable, as well as the surface is constantly cleansed by desquamation. And the new cells which is responsible to supply the loss is being produced in the deepest layer of the epidermis, and also the movement of cells and fluid takes place from within outwards. However, the protection is less perfect when it comes to the hairs and the sweat glands. But it is also seen that infection which is caused through this route, which means through the sweat gland, is also very uncommon. For the sweat is felt unfavorable for the bacterial growth, and the flow acts mechanically in washing away which may have entered the lungs. So as I've said, that infection by the root of sweat glands is very uncommon because here there will be presence of sweat, and this is a fluid which will be unfavorable for the growth of the bacteria and also washes away the organism which may have entered the ducts. However, infection by the roots of hair follicle is very common because here there will be no mechanical cleansing by the sweat. That is why the spaces around the hair follicle is the most common one. Because here there is no mechanical cleansing by the sweat, and here the spaces around these hair follicles is large, and the accumulated secretion of the hair glands as well as of the desquamated cells furnish a material in which the bacteria can grow. In this situation, when these bacteria grows as a mass, they may produce sufficient toxic material in order to destroy the adjacent living cells, and this will thus affect the entrance. Infection through the eye is also not common because here the surface is smooth and also is moist, right? And also here the eyelashes around the margins of the eyelids give some mechanical protection from the entrance of these bacteria. which contains dust. So how will it serve as a protection? It serves as a protection through the movement of these lids, which can also contain dust. So how does this serve as a protection? This serves as a protection because the constant movement of these lids as well as the accelerated secretion of tears act mechanically in removing these foreign substances. And it is also possible that the mechanical cleansing for the skin can be done by bathing daily in order to prevent these infections from occurring. So this is about the external surface. Now let's move to the internal surface. These internal surface of the body are much more exposed to attack, and also here the protection is not very efficient. The moisture which is present in these surfaces is both a protection as well as a source of danger. Why? Because it protects by favoring the lodgement near the orifice of the organism which is present in the inspired air. So here when a bacteria touches this moist surface, they cannot be raised from this, and because of this they will also not be carried further by the air currents. So that is why it is said that this moisture can also act as a source of protection. However, it can also act as a source of danger because it favors the growth of the bacteria which lodge on the surface. Here the respiratory surface, which is more exposed to the infections which is present in the air, is being protected by the cilia, which are the fine hair-like processes covering the cells of the surface, and by which their constant motion sweep out fine particles of all sorts which lodge on them. The cavity of the mouth also harbors large amount of organism, and many of them will be pathogenic. The food particles collect. So what happens here is that the food particles collect in the mouth and provide culture material. And also here there are many crypts and irregularity of surface which will be opposing the mechanical cleaning from occurring. And also here the infection in the middle ear, which is the most common cause of deafness, can take place by means of eustachian tube, which connects the cavity of the ear with the mouth. So these organisms from the mouth can further extend to various salivary glands by means of ducts and can give rise to infection. The tonsils, particularly in children, provide a favorable surface for infection as well. Why? Because here the mucous surface will be extending into these, forming deep pocket line with very thin epithelium, and in these debris of various sorts it accumulates and also provide material which is favorable for the bacterial growth to occur. The lungs is also one of the part which seems to offer the most favorable surface for infection, because here the surface 97 square yards is enormous. It is moist as well as the epithelial surface is very thin as to give practically no mechanical protection. So here large amount of air constantly passes in and out, and the surface is also in contact with this. However, in order to prevent the occurrence of these infection in these surfaces, and the surface is also in contact with this. So here this surface can be protected in various ways. The tubes or bronchi through which the air passes into and out of the lungs are covered by cilia. So here the surface of these tubes constantly enlarges as they branch, and this enlargement by retarding the motion of the air favors the lodgement of particles on the surface where they are removed by the action of the cilia. The entering air is also brought closely in contact with the moist surface at the narrow opening of the larynx so that the bacteria and other foreign substances can enter the lungs. In spite of these guards is shown not only by the infections which is taking place here, but also by the large amount of black carbon which is deposited in them from the soot contained in the air. However, you will also find that infection rarely take place from the source of the mouth of the esophagus, which leads to the stomach. This is due to the smoothness of the surface and to the rapidity with which the food passes through it. Infection by the stomach is also rare because it contains a strong acid secretion which destroys a number of bacteria which are taken in along with the food. And you will also be finding that many organisms whose growth is inhibited in the stomach are not being destroyed there but will pass through the intestine where the condition of the infection is more favorable. This large and very irregular surface is bathed in the fluid, which is also a good culture medium, but here only a single layer of cell will be covering it. So here these organisms which find many of these infectious diseases in both the man and animals will be finding their entrance by means of the alimentary canals, such as conditions like cholera, dysentery, as well as typhoid fever. So since we have discussed about how this infection can occur both on the external as well as the internal surface of the body, we've also discussed about how these infections, so here even infections occurring in the genitourinary system is very rare, that is very uncommon. Why? Because here the surface openings will be usually closed and the discharge of urine also act as a mechanical cleansing. Here the white tube of the vagina is also further protected by a normal bacterial flora which produces conditions hostile to the other as well as to the pathogenic bacteria. However, there are also certain most common infections that can occur, such as the sexual disease, which are due to the organism which finds a favorable condition for growth in and on the surface, which are conveyed, which finds a favorable condition for the growth in and the growth on the surface, and which are conveyed from a similar surface by sexual contact. So here, as we know that an infection is an invasion to a susceptible host, for example, a patient, by potentially harmful organisms such as bacteria, fungus, protozoa, which will ultimately result in a disease, right? So here the principal infecting agents are nothing but the bacteria, virus, fungus, as well as the protozoa. And colonization is also the presence and growth of the microorganism within the host but without the invasion of the tissues or without any damage to these tissues. And as we all know that all people have microorganism on their skin, but usually no disease occurs. These disease or infections only results when these pathogens grows or even multiply and alter the normal tissue function. And any disease which is directly transferred from an infectious person to the others is known as a contagious or a communicable disease. So now we have come to the end of this session, whereby in today's session we have discussed in detail about the nature of infection. We have discussed how can these infections occur on various parts of the body, as well as we have discussed in detail about the infections that can occur both on the external as well as on the internal surface of the body. So I hope you have got a clear understanding of this topic. I'll be meeting you in another session whereby we will be discussing about the chain of transmission, where you will be getting a detailed idea about how these infections can. I'll be meeting you guys in another session whereby we will be discussing about the chain of infection. So until then, have a good day. Thank you.